An Aryan brother is without a care. He walks where the weak and heartless won't dare. And if by chance he should stumble or lose control, his brothers are there to help reach his goal. For a worthy brother, no need is too great. He need not ask, fulfillment's his fate. For an Aryan brother, death holds no fear. Vengeance will be his, through his brothers still here. For the brotherhood means just what it implies. A brother's a brother till that brother dies. And if he is loyal and never lost faith, in each brother's heart will always be a place. So a brother I am and will always be, even after my life is taken away from me. I'll lie down content, knowing I stood, head held high, walking proud in the brotherhood.
People that are older and know what time it is know it's just business.
Yeah. Good morning and welcome back. It's your host, Gabe Morales. We've been covering Aryan Brotherhood members over the past 6 decades or so. Today, we're going to cover the I through K last names. I as in interviewing, interrogation, investigating, and intelligence. It just so happens that I wrote a book on those 4 topics called The 4 Eyes with my partner, Corey Cooper, who has extensive experience in corrections and police work. Of course, I only worked in corrections, so I have to give the majority of credit to Corey for this book, but I did give a lot of my input also. For 4 years, I was assigned to the United States Marine Corps Tactical Command Center, which basically was intelligence for the air wing of the Marine Corps. I'd work radar and radio, and we would communicate with Marines in the air as well as the ground, and even do joint operations with other services, the Army, Navy, and Air Force. As far as corrections, I actually was doing intelligence before I even worked in the business. As far as paying a lot of attention to my surroundings and individuals who I encountered. Became an investigative employee very shortly after I went through orientation at Folsom Prison. Basically, I gathered more facts than what were just included in officers' reports, because to be honest, a lot of times officers leave a lot of things out. So I did this on behalf of the hearing lieutenants and sergeants. As I mentioned previously several times, I also reviewed a lot of C files, which contained a lot of intelligence on individuals and enemies who gave confidential information against them. I also interviewed countless individuals out on the yard and in the housing units when I worked at New Folsom Prison from 1987 to 1993. I also interviewed thousands of offenders when I worked in classification for over 2 decades at the King County Jail. Interrogation is usually done by police officers, but I had to do a lot of disciplinary hearings. So sometimes I was interviewing them, sometimes I was interrogating them, and I honed my skills pretty good in those areas too. And as far as investigating, a lot of people said I'd be a good private investigator. Well, to be honest, I think a lot of people, even those in corrections, don't understand classification. Basically, you are checking out offenders' background information. You're investigating their criminal records and verifying that. And then you follow up by interviewing them and asking clarification questions. Maybe one day I'll do an episode just on classification, but it's definitely a job that many people don't understand on both sides of the fence. Today, I'll start off with Ronnie Fulton Irwin, who is from San Pablo. I show he committed a homicide in Contra Costa County in 2001. Looks like he must have fought that case for a few years, because I show he didn't enter CDC until April of 2005 under V numbers in Victor 77414. I show eventually that he was put up for membership by Ronnie Renegade Yandel, but it looks like that initially was denied by Buzzard Glass while he was in Corcoran Shoe, who I discussed a few episodes ago. But it looks like eventually Ronnie Irwin got made after he hit an individual named Squirrel for dissing another member's wife. I show that he has been housed at Tehachapi for the last few years. Next, we'll get into the J last names, as in jail or prison jargon, which basically means slang. You could go online and find jail and prison jargon dictionaries and find some pretty interesting words if you've never been behind the walls. Start off with David Camel Jepson, who was out of Midway City. I show he was arrested for forgery in 1981, whereby he was given CDC number C as in Charles 33193. He paroled in 1982, but committed a robbery in 1987 and was arrested in October of that year. I show that he was in the LA County Jail in February of 1988 whereby he got to a fight with a cellie that, believe it or not, made the LA Times. So must have been a pretty serious fight. Or a slow news day. Understand he was a well-known jailhouse lawyer, which basically means guys who do a lot of legal work in their cells, sometimes for themselves, representing themselves pro se in court, and sometimes working for other inmates. I show he was arrested by the feds and sent to the BOP under number 07169-085. I show that he was at Lompoc in 1993, got released but got popped for a firearm in 95, and I believe was sent to Pelican Bay State Prison, where he was there in the late 1990s. He then returned to the federal system, where I show he was at Florence and was involved in the homicide of an inmate named Aguirre. I show he was at the ADX in 2003, but had been released at the end of 2008. I show a Thomas Jarecki, who's out of the North Hollywood area of LA. I show he was popped on a dope charge in 1982, whereby he was given D number 84612. I show he was housed at Richard J. Donovan in 1995 and got popped for meth in 1998, whereby he was sent to the feds under BOP number 11627-112. I show he was held at Lompoc in 1999 and was released from the BOP in September 2017. I show Billy Joe Johnson, aka BJ, aka Psycho, who's out of Costa Mesa in Orange County. I show that he was a P9 member, which was considered to be a support group of the Aryan Brotherhood. I show that he was arrested numerous times, was a methamphetamine, heroin, and alcohol abuser. His rap sheet included robbery, residential burglaries, aggravated assault, grand theft, street terrorism, and, of course, possession of narcotics. He did multiple Orange County jail and CDC prison terms. If you want to know more about Billy Joe Johnson, check out my episode on the P9 when I talk quite a bit about him involving a major homicide case that P9 members were involved in. I understand that he was listed as no good after he hit Aryan Brotherhood member Joe Govey, who I covered a couple episodes ago. There was Kenneth Kenwood Johnson, who was at least a P9 associate who later became an Aryan Brotherhood member. He was named on the AB RICO indictment with Francis Clement as ordering homicides on behalf of the brand, including ordering the death of Brandon Lowry on January 24th, 2016 at Kern Valley State Prison. I show a Kenneth Snowman Johnson, who is a different individual. I show that he was out of the Bay Area as well as Citrus Heights, which is located between Sacramento and Folsom. I show that he was at least an Aryan Brotherhood associate in the early 1980s when he had C numbers in Charles, 44994. I show he paroled in 1983, but then was sent to Leavenworth in 1994, and I'm unsure what happened to him after that. If anybody recalls a Kenny Snowman Johnson from back in the 1980s, perhaps you can give me an update. There was a Mike Ellis Johnson, who's out of Orange County. I showed that he was an early Aryan Brotherhood member who was sent to the California Rehabilitation Center at Norco in 1967, but had paroled in 1968. It looks like he returned to CRC in 1969 and 1971. Evidently, he couldn't clean up his drug habit because I show he was popped for a burg charge in 1975, but this time he wasn't sent to rehab. He was sent behind the big walls under B number 68716. I show he paroled in 1977, but just couldn't stay off that dope and got popped in 1982 and given C numbers in Charles, 48502. I show he paroled in 1984, but evidently just couldn't kick the habit and pulled a bank robbery in 1989 where he was given BOP number 23097-008. I show that he was housed at Phoenix in 1989 and SAF in 1999, as well as Terminal Island in 2006, but was released in July of that year. I show there was a James Slammer Jones out of LA. I show he was at least an Aryan Brotherhood associate and got popped on a dope charge in 1989. He then was given a violation in 1993, whereby he was assigned H number, as in Henry, 94629. I show he got popped on dope charges throughout the 1990s and was housed at Pelican Bay in the year 2000, whereby an additional assault by prisoner charge was added. I show he paroled in the year 2002 and had parole violations in 2003 and 2005, when I lost track of him. Now I'll get into the K last names, as in kite. Kites can be formal requests for services to corrections officials, or they can be informal, often contraband messages written in tiny writing, sometimes 3 to 4 lines on lined paper, so microscopic you need a magnifying glass to read them. Often these kites are passed hand to hand, but extremely sensitive kites are actually often keistered. Yes, they keister them in things like empty chapstick casings placed in the anal cavity, also called "you're safe," and then take them out and get that message out to the individual is intended for. Often these are hitless, which of course they could be prosecuted for solicitation of murder. So you can see why they put so much security on these things. I'll resume with Dennis Canos, who's out of Fontana, who is pictured here in the same picture that I talked about Maria Crystal Alonso, who was gifted to Joe Morgan by Aryan Brotherhood member Bobby Hedberg. Dennis Canos is standing with his wife, of course, Joe Morgan with Maria Crystal Alonso, and we have original Mexican Mafia members, Eddie Potato Nose Lorera and Guero Buff Flores, standing with their wives. I understand that Dennis Canos was housed at the LA County Jail in 1972, but I'm unsure what happened to him in later years. Charles Kell, AB associate Dennis Barron, and Mexican Mafia member Rodney Bruiser Briceño killed a prisoner in USP Terre Haute on orders from Barry Mills. There is some debate whether Charles Kell was only associate or a member in the brand. There is a Gregory Buzzard Kiefer, who was out of Paramount. I showed that he was an Aryan Brotherhood member or associate, but had ran afoul of the brand and was killed on September 23, 1983, by Puppet McKinney and two other AB associates. When the 2001-2002 RICO trials were announced, this homicide is mentioned as count number 4. I'll get more into the Kiefer homicide when I get to William Puppet McKinney. There was a Samuel Heaton, who I show was an Aryan Brotherhood associate. He may have been also affiliated with P9, but I show he was named in the 2019 RICO indictment. His father may have had the same name under BOP number 39827-080, but I show he was released in 1988 from the feds. There was a Charles, a.k.a. Chuck Kell, who I show was an Aryan Brotherhood associate in the 1970s under BOP number 89626-132. I show that he was involved in the homicide of an inmate, I believe at Terre Haute in 1979, but was released in April of 1997. There was Donald Donnie Kennedy, who I have a few pictures of, and was an Aryan Brotherhood member in the 1970s through 1980s. And was involved in the homicide of William Puppet McKinney. I show he is also named in that 2002 RICO case. There was a Jerry Noble Kennedy, aka Termite, out of Sacramento. He was an Aryan Brotherhood associate and said to be one of the founders of the Sacramaniacs. Sacramaniacs is a group of bikers and peckerwoods, mostly from the North Sacramento County area. I showed that Termite was convicted of killing a Lynn County, Oregon meth dealer named Glenn Chambers on March 15, 1993. And for that case, he was sent to death row, where he still resides. There was a Stephen Casper Kessler, who I've talked about several times in previous episodes, that was an Aryan Brotherhood member, but broke off to start his own faction called the Host of Bahala. Usually the Aryan Brotherhood is aligned with the Mexican Mafia, but in this case, Stephen Kessler aligned his group with the Nuestra Familia when he had B number 40808. I show that he even stabbed longtime Aryan Brotherhood member Danny Dog Rawlinson in 1973. Rawlinson was well liked by the AB, so I'm sure that didn't help Kessler's case either. I show he was shipped out to Oregon State Prison, but then returned in protective custody under C number, as in Charles, 55114, and I'm sure what happened to him after that. In 1991, AB member Kurt King, BOP number 40863-066, stabbed Jimmy Doc Inman at USP Marion. This was another hit that was ordered by Barry the Red Baron Mills. Evidently, Inman had punched an Aryan Brotherhood member at San Quentin years before, and he also had a snitch jacket. This occurred at USP Marion on September 30th, 1993. There's Carl Conan Knorr, who was actually out of Tennessee, but also had ties to Riverside. I show he was an AB associate when he was involved in the killing of a DC Black at Marion on May 18th, 1999, when he had BOP number 13161-075. I show that he committed that homicide after being ordered by Marion AB council member David Big Dave Sahakian. I show that Knorr grabbed the DCB and held him, while another Aryan Brotherhood member named Richard McIntosh allegedly stabbed him 9 times with a shank. The victim died after his heart was punctured. Evidently, this individual had a violent confrontation with another ABS who went to Sahakian seeking revenge, which is when Big Dave ordered Conan and McIntosh to attack the victim. He ended up being charged in that 2002 RICO case and it looks like fought his case until July 2008 when he pled guilty to voluntary manslaughter and possession of a dangerous weapon in a federal facility as well as possession of contraband. Inmate manufactured alcohol in prison, also known as Pruno. For that plea, he was given 11 and a half years in federal prison. I show that Carl Edgar Nora Jr. was released from federal prison in March of 2015. I show a Mitchell Kolb, who was out of Lincoln County, Washington. I show that he was an Aryan Brotherhood associate at the very least when he had BOP number 02689-081. I also have notes that he was told to hit Kenny Ektuka, who I covered in the very first episode. As you may recall, Ektuka was the leader of the Lifers Club, which consisted of mostly the Caucasian inmates at the Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla back in the late 1970s when he was sent to the feds and soon joined the brand. But he fell out of favor when he bumped heads with David Sahakian. Often, when guys are from a certain state or county in prison and jail, they're told to hit any individual who's in bad standings. It's called clean up your mess. That's actually what they call it. Clean up your mess. Take the garbage out. I show that Mitchell Kolb was at the ADX in 2006, but was released in the year 2011. I'll very briefly mention Mark Frank Kowalski, who's affiliated with the American Front Skinheads. His big claim to fame was he bombed the NAACP office in Tacoma, Washington. And due to his lawyer claiming that he couldn't get a fair trial in Tacoma, which is located in Pierce County, he was housed at the King County Jail, where I actually interviewed him several times in the early 90s. He then was convicted of that as a hate crime and sent to the feds under BOP number 23642-086. Skinheads and Peckerwoods will often support white prison gangs, and although I don't show that Kowalski ever being an Aryan Brotherhood member, he was a supporter, especially when they went to war with the DC Blacks when he was housed at Marion. Bobby Cozy flew mostly under the radar in Orange County and specialized in robberies. He was followed very closely by then senior parole agent Brian Perry. He ended up paroling and killing his brother and eventually committed suicide. There was Ronald, a.k.a. Radar, a.k.a. Scott Hunter Kruger, who was very close to Blinky Griffin. I understand that there was an individual named John Butch Calfee who hid in his cell when Buzzard Harris, who I discussed a couple episodes ago, was stabbed by blacks at Soledad. For this act of cowardice, Butch Calfee was almost stabbed to death by Scott Hunter Kruger and Calfee's sponsor, Robert Blinky Griffin. So that's it for the I through K last names. I hope you enjoyed this episode and return to watch more. Don't forget, you can purchase my book, The History of the Aryan Brotherhood, via Amazon.com and other outlets. For now, this is Gabe Morales signing off for Gangsters, Cops, and Politicians. An Aryan brother is without a care. He walks where the weak and heartless won't dare. And if by chance he should stumble or lose control, his brothers are there to help reach his goal. For a worthy brother, no need is too great. He need not ask, fulfillment's his fate. For an Aryan brother, death holds no fear. Vengeance will be his, through his brothers still here. For the brotherhood means just what it implies. A brother's a brother till that brother dies. And if he is loyal and never lost faith, in each brother's heart will always be a place. So a brother I am, and will always be, even after my life is taken away from me. I'll lie down content, knowing I stood, head held high, walking proud in the brotherhood.
People that are older know what time it is now. It's just business.
Yeah.